All right, let's get right to that breaking news. It comes from the Justice Department. MS now confirming reports that former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted for the second time. Joining us, MS Now senior investigative reporter Carol Leonnig, and MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin, and Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and MS Now political analyst Eugene Robinson. Carol, what do we understand this indictment to be about?
We are told by a very good source that this indictment relates to an investigation into the allegations that former FBI Director James Comey had made threats against the president's life when he posted something on Instagram, which was a picture of some shells arranged in a certain way, which he took to be a political message. He captioned it, oh, interesting message here. It said 8647. He was interviewed about this by FBI agents as he drove back from a beach trip, and this investigation went on. And now we understand a grand jury has returned an indictment for him making this threat against the life of the president.
Legally sound footing? Lisa?
It's hard to say because the Supreme Court has upheld a statute that penalizes making threats against a president. People said, for example, in the 1960s that this was an infringement on First Amendment rights. The Supreme Court said, no, the statute is constitutional, but it has to be a true threat. And by that, what some people have interpreted that to mean is that a reasonable person looking at all of the evidence would themselves understand it as a threat. Political hyperbole, said the Supreme Court, is not a threat. Something made in jest is not a threat. So I think there is somewhat of an uphill climb here for the Department of Justice in establishing that Jim Comey actually meant this as a threat against the life of the president, as opposed to a statement about getting rid of him from office or having the country be rid of him as a political scourge, not as a threat against his life, Katie.
8647 arranged with shells on a beach and posted to Instagram. Do you see that, Eugene, as a threat against the president's life?
Well, you know, Katie, I think I'm a reasonable person, according to the Supreme Court standard. And no, my understanding of what 86 means is to kick someone out. And in the context of talking about a president, in this political context, it means you kick him out of office. And that's a perfectly normal thing to say if you were a political opponent of President Trump, and certainly would be protected speech. So, Lisa is the expert on how the Supreme Court might slice this very thin slice of potato, but I think it's a stretch. I mean, it seems obvious to me that they were looking for something to charge Comey with, or something else to charge Comey with, having failed the first time around, and they think this is it.
Yeah, and just a note for everybody, James Comey says he saw these shells arranged in this way on the beach and took a picture of it, that he himself did not arrange these shells. But Carol, remind us what this led to. Wasn't he on vacation at the time? Was it the FBI or was it Secret Service? Did they follow him home on his drive back to, where was it, Virginia or Maryland?
He lives in Virginia. He was, followed in a car. As Secret Service Protective Intelligence Division interviewed him, but the FBI also has raised questions about this. Protective Intelligence Division, just so you know, tries to assess threats, whether they're made in a bar or on social media or outside the gates of the White House, and they interview people that they fear are threatening the president's life. This was viewed at the time, to Gene's point, as a little bit of overkill, because James Comey could have written on social media, I hope we don't reelect this president, or I hope he leaves office soon. And that would not be a threat of violence. 8647 in shells involves some slang. And I will remark that when Comey was asked about this, he took down the post and said he took it to be, and he interpreted it to be, a political statement of, let's not have this guy as president anymore. I'm paraphrasing, but he took it as a political statement and took it down saying, I don't mean any violence. I don't intend any violence. And that's why I'm removing it. So that was fairly quickly after being questioned.
Lisa?
I want to give some context about that Supreme Court case that I was talking about. In 1966, an African-American war protester, Robert Watts, had attended an anti-war rally. And at the rally, he said, having received his draft card, "If they ever make me carry a rifle, the first man I want to get in my sights is LBJ. They are not going to make me kill my black brothers." He was overheard saying that by someone from the Army Intelligence Corps, and that led to his arrest. When the Supreme Court then, Katie, ruled on whether or not he could be convicted for making a threat against the president, what they said was, what is a threat must be distinguished from what is constitutionally protected speech. The language of the political arena is often vituperative, abusive, and inexact. Again, based on that Supreme Court standard, I think the Department of Justice here has somewhat of an uphill battle in demonstrating that Jim Comey intended for a constellation of shells he happened upon to be a threat against the life of this president.
Eugene mentioned something a moment ago. They had tried to indict him before that case was thrown out. Remind us again, Carol, what happened?
I'm so sorry. I'm getting something on my phone. Can you ask me again, Katie, the question?
The Justice Department tried to indict James Comey before it was thrown out. Remind us what happened.
So many problems with that case. First off, the appointment of the prosecutor in that case. You may remember that Lindsay Halligan was installed as the acting U.S. attorney by President Trump after he threatened to fire and ultimately drove out the other acting U.S. attorney he had chosen, Eric Siebert, in the Eastern District of Virginia. The removal or the forced departure of Mr. Siebert happened because he reported to his higher-ups that he did not believe the evidence warranted seeking a grand jury case against Comey for lying to Congress. He did not believe the case stood up. He wasn't the only one in the Department of Justice. I have talked to political appointees in the Department of Justice who believed the evidence just did not warrant anything along the lines of claiming that James Comey misled or misstated or lied intentionally to Congress about whether or not he had leaked things about the Russian interference probe. He said he stood by his previous testimony, and that is basically what he said. He was misquoted in the indictment, but Lindsay Halligan pursued it within days. I think it was 4 days after she got into that job. That indictment was dismissed by the chief judge and upheld by an appeals court because Lindsay Halligan was not legally appointed to that job.
Eugene, again, let's just talk about the moment we're in. This is a Department of Justice that has made it clear through the actions and the indictments and the investigations that anybody who the president has gone up against politically or doesn't like or feels, if he feels they've been unfair to him, that they're in the line of sights. And I don't mean that violently. I mean just they're going to be investigated. And that goes for people at DOJ who worked on investigations, who were assigned them, being fired from DOJ or the FBI. It goes to political opponents. It goes to the former FBI director. What is the priority from your position, as you see it, of this Justice Department?
I am your retribution. I mean, retribution is something that apparently President Trump was absolutely serious about when he said during the campaign, I am your retribution. I guess he meant I am my retribution, because he is determined, obviously now, to get back at anybody who he thinks wronged him. And this is like a constant undercurrent now, and this is an engine that churns along regardless of whatever else is happening in the world or in the nation. So yes, we're at war with Iran. Yes, King Charles is here. Yes, this. Yes, that. Economy, but retribution just kind of keeps moving ahead, and clearly, it runs into a brick wall, and it tries to find some way around it. It looks for another opening, and Comey is one of his main targets, and I think he's just going to keep coming at Comey.
All right, Eugene Daniels, thank you very much.